Hi, my name is Alan Gleeson, the CEO of Contento, and your host for this episode of SaaStock SaaS GTM Unlocked, where we'll be talking about the state of play in SaaS GTM. Hi Dee, before we get going, I'd love a little bit of an introduction about yourself and your background.
Sure, great to be here, Alan. Thanks for having me here. So my name is Dee Coakley. I'm co-founder and CEO at a business called Boundless. In terms of my background, I was a 3-time B2B SaaS COO before founding Boundless. And as a COO, the biggest problem that I ever found myself facing was trying to figure out compliance for workers that I had internationally. So what kind of employment agreements was I going to put them on? What were my obligations as an employer? Now these people were in other countries. How would I handle global payroll? And that's what we do at Boundless.
So great, in some ways you recognize the problem that you had in your role and then were able to translate it into a startup.
Very much so, and it was here at SaaStock in 2018 where I really refined that idea, and I actually made the decision while I was here at SaaStock in 2018 to focus on this business.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit more about Boundless, specifically the challenges that you solve and how you solve them.
Sure, so our customers are companies with workers spread maybe over a number of different countries, and we'll support those companies in the countries where they don't have established operations. So we have a network of entities across 30 different countries. We're registered to operate in those countries, registered with the local tax authorities, have relationships with local benefits providers, and all of that means that our customers can piggyback on our infrastructure. So very quickly and easily they can get set up to employ workers in those countries and stay compliant around everything relating to HR, payroll and benefits.
Which I guess in a kind of remote world is increasingly important, where you're looking to hire talent from different countries, right?
Absolutely, so broadening that talent pool to a global reach and enabling companies to offer location flexibility to their workers.
And tell me, Dee, is it mostly the enterprise end of the spectrum, or can this work for smaller startups that are just looking to hire the first few people overseas?
It's more SMB and mid-market.
Okay.
So enterprise businesses will often have established operations in these countries, but there's no company too small. We work with companies anywhere from maybe 10 or 15 people up to, they might have a few thousand people.
Okay, so largely helping them on the operations, again a reflection of your kind of journey through the operation cycle.
Absolutely.
Excellent. One of the topics you talked about today was founder-led sales, so can you talk to me a little bit about your role as a founder that's doing some selling for the company?
Yeah, sure. So I never saw myself as a salesperson. Wasn't something I ever expected to end up doing in my life. I think it took me quite some time to realize that I am actually able to sell this product. No one can sell a product like a founder can. So at Boundless, we were selling for about a year before we brought in any external sales hires. And in the early days, someone asked me about this earlier today. They said, what was your strategy? And I said, there was no strategy. We made it up as we went along. But we were reaching out to network. We weren't doing a hard sell in the very early days. We were asking to talk to anyone we knew who was a senior leader at a company with international teams. And everyone we talked to, we were doing discovery calls, not selling. And everyone we talked to, we asked them who else they could introduce us to that fit that profile. And really, we didn't realize at the time, but we were actually pipeline building.
Yeah.
So by the time we brought in our first sales hire, there was a pipeline there for them to adopt and to work those leads through to conversion.
Makes a lot of sense. But I guess, how were you able to manage this process if you weren't translating these into revenue, I guess, at the time? Or was that just part of the journey that you felt, that the approach was to be almost discovery-led, and then if there was a real need, you could probably meet it with coming in on a solution, I guess?
Yeah, in the early stages, it was discovery, and that was what we were using to define our product roadmap. So we had this concept, this theory, that there would be demand for this.
Yeah.
We had a thesis around what the product needed to be, what the pricing should be. We were very interested in the language that companies used to describe this problem. So our space, the employer of record space, was not, we were category creating in the very early stages. It then became a very busy market.
Yes.
So we needed to ask a lot of questions and listen. So that's what we were focused on in the first instance. So this was before we developed a product, while we were building out that product. Yeah. So that was the earliest stage. We weren't even looking, we didn't have a product to sell at that point.
Yeah.
Once we had the product to sell, then we got a little more focused on it being a sale rather than
Yeah.
a discovery discussion.
And kind of bring us up to full speed now. Are you still leading the sales function? So transitioning away from the discovery calls, but are you still founder-led in your sales, or have you kind of transitioned away from that?
So we closed our first customers in mid-2020,
Okay.
so a little over 4 years ago now. We brought in our first sales hire probably about a year after that.
Okay, right.
And then when we were just at about $1 million ARR, we brought in our second salesperson. Now, since then, we've built that team out a little. We have a couple more account executives. We have an SDR, a BDR for more mid-market stuff. But we're learning all the time, and we're evolving. We're evolving that sales function and how that sales function operates all the time.
And tell me, flipping it on its head, is there some lessons from that journey that are worth imparting? What are some of the kind of key things, Dee, that you think about that would be advice for others earlier on their journey to you?
Yeah, there are many lessons. We didn't have a go-to-market C-level person in the company early on. I mean, if I was founding a business again, I would definitely look to have someone go-to-market who was more senior earlier on. We made things up as we went along. I mean, that's the founder way. I think having a more defined strategy around go-to-market, really looking to speak to experts in that space and getting a strategy defined and documented is something that I would do at an earlier stage if I was starting another startup. Possibly we would have brought in a hire earlier, but it's really hard to say what the alternative path might have looked like. Evidently, we were ready to bring in someone at that point. That person had great success in year one, and we had these signals around traction. So we were seeing inbound doing well. First, we invested in content very early. We were getting inbound from that, and that was what gave us that signal that maybe we were ready for this hire. So yeah, more on the strategy side. And getting leadership right. We're still working on this. We're looking at bringing in a VP sales hire as soon as we find the right person.
Yeah.
So yeah, important to focus on that leadership, direction, accountability for a sales team. That's something we're bringing in now.
But a lot of these, Dee, are quite tricky, right? Because as a leader of a company, you've got this inherent tension between needing to attract talent, but more senior talent, but that increases your burn and cost base, and it's sort of, that's why these decisions can be quite difficult, right? Because they're big calls, right?
Yeah, and I was a COO at 3 businesses before this. I have a lot of founder friends. I've seen a lot of senior sales hires not going well.
Yeah.
There was an article someone shared with me recently, I think it was from the Harvard Business Review, 70% of senior sales leaders don't work out.
Don't you what?
Don't work out. 70%.
Yeah.
That's a high failure rate. So that's why I've been pretty slow to bring in someone very senior. Been hunting for the right person, but yeah, it's not a decision that I'll make quickly. I often wonder, will I look back and regret that and wish I'd done it sooner? But the wrong person, there's a big cost, a high cost associated with the wrong person in a role like this.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, and I guess one thing what I'd be interested in, Dee, would be how do you actually flip the odds in your favour a little bit, right? So again, the stats sound accurate, right? I think that report is probably accurate. So how then, because in some ways the sales and marketing hires are the hardest ones to make. Marketing people are good at marketing themselves. Sales people are good at selling themselves, right? And you can have some people in functions that are, lucky that the tide that they were on lifted the boat, so they look like a real great success, but often it's because of the industry or the team they were in. So how, when you look at this sales hire, what are the sort of dimensions that you're thinking about to try and really ensure that they're the right person, and some of the techniques you might be adopting to try and get the right hire?
Well, someone I sat opposite at dinner last night who is an expert in the sales space pointed out to me that you should always hire in pairs. Obviously it doesn't work at the VP level, but with account execs, SDRs, hire in pairs, because then you have a frame of reference. I mean, this is advice I've heard left, right and centre. All of my 16 years in startups, I ignored that advice. Maybe I'll adopt that approach. I think it's probably good advice. With the senior hire, a conversation I've been having with some people is around the fact we're not cookie cutter.
Yeah.
We haven't raised huge sums of money. We've raised 5.5 million. It's been quite some time since we've raised any investment. So we've always been super capital efficient.
Yeah.
And I think that has meant we've ended up with metrics, and we have a very small team for where we're at in terms of revenue. You know, we're not aligned with the classic SaaS business. When people ask me what stage we are, probably somewhere between Series A and Series B.
Yeah.
So the kind of VP sales hire that we'll bring in, rather than looking for someone that's a fit for the trajectory we're about to go on in revenue, I probably need to find someone that's actually joined a company at quite an earlier stage. I may be looking at someone that's joined a company at about 3 million ARR, which is a lot earlier than where we're at today, because we still have a lot of processes to figure out, we have a lot of structure that we need to put in place. So someone who's been in an environment where all of that was established before they came into that environment is probably not going to be a fit for us. This person needs to be a problem solver.
I think it's a crucial point, and it's easy to overlook it, right? Because again, you could be seduced by a CV that has some pretty big brand names on it, but actually, to your point, that may be the wrong type of fit, and it's back to those that you can identify that are, that have done it at a sort of different level, and where it's more resource constrained, and whereby perhaps they're not responsible for leads exclusively, but they might be, to your point, responsible for putting the processes into place, maybe managing the team, and ensuring then that you're kind of well equipped for the next stage of growth. Yeah,
asking that question, what has this person actually done? Not simply where have they been. So not just about the logos, but about what they've actually achieved.
Yeah, and again, it's probably a long enough process because you need to have a lot of conversations to try and really sort it out, I guess.
Yeah, so we have an interim fractional person in at the moment, so that's fantastic. That's been a huge weight off my shoulders. That's very recent.
Excellent.
But it feels, and then they're going to work with us to hire this perm hire, so that feels like the right move right now.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that, Dee. Just taking us back, changing tack slightly, going back to kind of GTM motion. What does it take to implement a GTM motion successfully, do you think?
So I think this is very business dependent, and it's very product dependent. In our case, we're HR tech. Our buyer decision maker is the most senior people or HR leader in an organization. These people are very hard to reach. You won't find them here at a conference like SaaStock. They don't like conferences, they don't like events. They're not really active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
They don't have a network. They don't want to network.
Right.
No interest in networking. And they hate to be sold to.
Oh gosh, so all of a sudden, where do you find these people and how do you sell to them, right?
And the earliest decision we made, our second or third hire was a content writer. That person has grown with the business, is now our head of marketing. And we invested in very long form thought leadership style content from the very earliest days. When we had no one visiting our website, we were posting these really long detailed blog posts. We've continued that to this day, and SEO inbound through content has been our best performing channel always, and I suspect it may always be our best channel. So for us, when we looked at our audience and thought about what mattered to them, they care about detail. They care about knowledge, information. They want us to share knowledge with them. It's important to them that we demonstrate our expertise. And I've just had coffee here with someone who is also selling a compliance product, very different audience. But we really noticed we have these parallels in terms of how we communicate what we do. So investing in content very, very early, that's I would say our core pillar for our go-to-market motion. Second is around events, HR events where our audience are at, speaking at events. We're about to start running our own events.
Oh, great.
So things like breakfast briefings, things where we bring together thought leaders in our space and share that knowledge with our audience. We've started experimenting with snail mail.
Okay, right, old school.
Interesting to see how that goes. And we're back doing PR. We did PR for quite some time, took a little break from it, back doing that once again. again, demonstrating our expertise in publications where they're quite gnarly topics focused on employment law, payroll compliance, and that brings leads into us also.
So a nice mix there, Dee.
Real mix, yeah. And it's only when you have the mix that you notice any traction across any of the bases.
100%. I'm going to skip on attribution because I think that's probably a different topic around all these different channels and measuring them. But I guess just to kind of conclude with sort of a few tips for people that would be looking at GTM or earlier on their journey, what are the kind of 2 or 3 nuggets that hopefully you can share with viewers of this?
It's never too early to start thinking about go-to-market. It was an area I was terrified of, that I didn't have any background or experience in. If I was founding a startup again, I would be starting to work on lead generation and demand generation before I ever had a product live. And think about it in terms of pipeline building. Set out your sales goals. Figure out what level of coverage of target that you need. So what level does your pipeline need to be at to ensure you'll hit your targets? And start to look at the weighted value of that pipeline. There's great articles on this stuff online. If that term weighted value of pipeline, if that's not meaningful to you, have a look, see what that's about. And start to think about the pipeline that you have and what that's ultimately likely to be worth to you. It's all going to be guesswork in the early days. But having that rigor, that was something we didn't have, that we have now. Having that rigor around considering what your pipeline's actually likely to be worth, and having an understanding of what's the number, what does your goal need to be around what you need to top up the pipeline with. So rather than focusing on sales goals and sales targets and what you're going to end up with at the end of the pipeline. In the early days, your job is not closing sales. In the early days, your job is pipeline building.
Yes.
So what are your targets around pipeline building, and focus on that?
It's a key point, actually, and one I'm sure the VCs are typically very data-driven, will be very happy with that sort of approach.
Likely, yeah.
Great. Well, listen, Dee, that was excellent. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.